Good evening to you.
These guys are all big influences on me and certainly house music.
No, that does not sound like a life.
Walk around with that collar popped up.
Yeah.
Hey, do this.
Yeah.
You move
So,
there.
so let's go on that. I want to talk a little bit about each of your illustrious careers, because you guys have done a lot. All three of you have done amazing, have had amazing contributions to what we call house music. This is the Vintage House Show. And so part of what that is about is celebration and preservation. This is Lawrence framing, but the celebration and preservation of Chicago house legends and Chicago house music. And I think
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Vintage House Show. It's the premier show covering the history, the business, and the culture that is house music. Born and bred here in Chicago, where I am broadcasting from, on WNUR in Evanston, Chicago, in HD1 on 89.3 on your FM dial. It's your main man, Mega. And I am thrilled to be with you for a summer episode of Vintage House. With Chicago, it's one extreme or the other. We were wondering where summer was, and then of course it hit like a 95-degree intense heat wave, and so we're happy about it. We're thrilled because along with the weather heat, we are bringing you artists and guest and producer, remixer, DJ heat here on this episode of Vintage House Show. Someone that I've had the pleasure of working with. We got, great stories to tell and to share. And so without further ado, he is a returning guest to the Vintage House Show, but he hasn't been necessarily on with your main man Mega one-on-one. And so we worked to remedy that. And I'm pleased to introduce tonight's guest, Mr. Rick Lenoir. Rick, welcome.
Hello, Mega.
Hello,
we finally
sir.
get a chance to do this, which is great.
Absolutely. It is thrilling to have you. Of course, an hour is not going to be enough to describe. There were at least 5 years of something that was very magical that you guys allowed me to be a part of. But I want to come back to that. And as we do on each Vintage House Show, most of them at least, we ask our guest about pre-house stuff, like where did you grow up, what part of town, and what high school did you go to? So I yield the floor to you, sir.
All right. Well, I have to start by thanking you for inviting me and having me the opportunity to come back and go a little deeper in depth, and obviously to talk to you, because I talked to Lori and that was great, and I love Lori. I am West Sider, West Side Chicago, Austin. That's right, Austin neighborhood. And was fortunate enough to go to a school that a grammar school called Resurrection that kind of gave me a platform, an opportunity to build on some work that was going on there. And we talked about that, I think, when we were on before, when we had Kevin and Ray on. you know, to kind of build on that. So that's where the journey starts, is on the west side of Chicago. I thank my parents for finding a house 2 blocks from Resurrection, across from the park. If we had moved somewhere else, I don't know that, it's the butterfly effect of a lot of the things that I was blessed to kind of be a part of would have happened if they had not, found that 2 flat on the west side. And that's kind of where we grew up. In high school, I went to St. Ignatius, which has a bit of a connection to house, which I did not know Mike Izubuku. I knew he was there before me, but he went to St. Ignatius. Um, and there was and Chip E was there for, I think, his freshman year, before he transferred. So there is a bit of connection. And my sister went to St. Ignatius, which obviously, was a big part of first record that Larry Thompson and I did.
So you jumped the shark very well. Obviously, an expert guest on this show, because you went into not only the neighborhood, the grade school, and the high school, but what other musical connections existed from that high school. And you also call out an important point that besides you, Mike Izuku, Chip E, and your sister um, attended there, but as part of the Catholic high school movement that led to this thing we call house, St. Ignatius parties lent themselves well to that movement. And so I certainly had some fond memories of attending
Oh,
Iggy.
wow. So it's funny you mentioned this. I've been spending some time with my mom, and one of the things we talk about, she loves to reminisce on some of the parties, and both the Resurrection and parties at St. Ignatius, because one of the things, uh, uh, you know, so, and this is a long story. We don't have a ton of time, but I'm smiling because I'll tell the story real quick. I played basketball at St. Ignatius, and I was probably a decent basketball player. I was always distracted because I was always thinking more probably about music than I was about basketball. But I had this brilliant idea my junior year that I was going to throw a party after our Mount Carmel basketball game. Um, and on the surface of it, it seemed like a really good idea, right? Because, it's Mount Carmel, it's Ignatius, it's all those great things, right? So we'll be able to piggyback on that. And the problem was the game went long. I think it might have even went into overtime. And so can't start the party because the game's going on, at least so you
Absolutely.
know.
Yeah.
So I am on the bench, right? And apparently all hell's breaking loose upstairs because people are trying to get
To
into the
get in.
cafeteria,
Yeah.
and you're nodding your head like you might have been there this day. And
It sounds familiar.
yeah, and they pushed the plexiglass of the door in, and it got to the point, someone came down to me on the bench, because I was on the bench, and they said, we're going to start the party. And so while the game is going on, all you hear in overtime is like dunk, dunk, dunk. They had to start the party because you had to get those kids in. There was the
Yeah.
only way,
To
and
prevent
so,
mayhem.
oh God, it was crazy. So it's funny you would mention that. That's a little detour, but and I rented the cafeteria out a couple other times after that, and then it got to be a bit much. The school, um, let's just say, they weren't ready for what we were doing at the time. And I gotta mention Jerry King,
Jerry
producer.
King also went.
Yeah, he went to
to
Ignatius as well.
Ignatius.
So I don't want to forget that. And this probably I'm going to forget somebody else too, but I want to remember that too. But yeah, you mentioned the parties.
So, so you were on the party goer side of the equation then, but at some point you made the pivot toward DJing, producing. what was the catalyst and inspiration for that pivot?
So I don't know if it was much of a pivot as it was an acceleration. So I actually started DJing, and I can actually go back 1979. I was doing kiddie discos on the west side at the YWCA up on Harrison. So the West Siders, the folks from Austin will know what I'm talking about. Me and Rob Thurman actually would do some of those parties. And
Wow, that's a name I had not
yeah,
heard
yeah.
before.
Rob went to Resurrection as well. So
Okay.
we would do those parties up at the Y on Harrison, and but it were kiddie discos. We weren't we were just playing records because at the same time, you know, uh, I was always fascinated with WDAI, disco
Disco
DAI, and I
DI.
didn't know how they blended those records, right? It was just it was magical, and so I've always been pretty inquisitive, and so that part of it was just having to learn how do they do that, and so once I got in high school, I had an opportunity. You take the bus and you go to it wasn't Guitar Center, what was it, Soundcraft, Pacific Stereo. You had all these stereo joints,
Yes.
um, and you'd ask questions, and and they would tell you you need a mixer, and you need to do this, you need to do that. And so it kind of grew into me having my first set of Technique B210 turntables,
A belt
uh,
drive
belt
jamming.
drives, right, and starting to mix in like 1979, and um, starting to throw parties and saving up money. And Richard Green, who's passed away, I remember he I want to say, what was it called, Soundcraft, down on, someone will put in the chat, down on Oak Street, what was that joint called?
Yeah, calling all history
Yeah, there'll be some. And
aficionados. I
I remember,
remember that place on Rush as
yeah,
well.
yeah. And I remember I saved up the money and went and put my deposit down on the 1200s because they didn't have them in stock. You had to put your money down and wait for them to come in. And I remember getting the phone call when they came in, and we got a ride down there to pick them up. And I had 1200s, and it was like a big deal. And there were guys doing parties that didn't have 1200s that were doing big things, and I had a set of 1200s, but it was from saving the money from the little parties we were doing here and there, and getting and just growing the DJ. And so I say that to say it was more of an acceleration, less of a pivot, because I always wished I could dance, right?
Okay.
But I found myself always on the other side of it, playing the music and being at Resurrection, and kind of growing into the parties there from when the youth group parties were there. Rob and I used to DJ they were like for the elementary school. The youth group were having parties for high schoolers,
Okay.
and
Yeah, that's
most of those,
fundraisers.
right, it was a
Yeah.
fundraiser for the youth group,
Yeah.
and they did well. And I remember was you met Ray Jones and Derek Gunn, Mr. J and Dr. Gunn. When Ray was going off to college, it kind of opened the door to start doing those high school parties. And coincidentally, I'm now in high school, and but the youth group didn't exist anymore. So I'm in promotion mode. I'm promoting these parties, and um, and getting really creative. And I used to drive around with posters on the side of my car, and when I was by the time I started driving and everything,
Love it.
and then connected with Park Avenue Productions and
Okay.
promotion. And once with Keith and Steve, and as part of Park Avenue, we really kind of took Res, and we went to the next level. And I was fortunate enough to be there, but it wasn't me just DJing at Res. I was really fortunate enough to have folks want to book me for other things. So, we just lost Terrible Ted a month or so, a couple months back, and he was a promoter, one of the first promoters to hire me and book me to go play at Da Vinci Manor, and I was always grateful for that opportunity. And I've talked a lot about, the opportunities to work with Rainbow with Tony Batoy. And a lot of those things started because of Rez, because of the following that kind of built up and kind of cultivated and grew at Resurrection. So, and Resurrection wasn't, like I said, the West Side was popping. You had the Factory, you had the Firehouse for a little while. Da Vinci Manor was Da Vinci Manor. It was the big dog, but it was just one of those, things that it kind of grew an audience, and it's one of the things that's interesting now because you see so many folks that DJ and they're like, well, nobody will put me on and I can't get an opportunity and promoters won't. And and I don't really have I guess it's gonna sound harsh when I say this, but I don't really have a ton of patience with it because it's like you got to go out and build it.
It's a grind.
You got to build it, build your audience, get you a small spot and just build it. And so, but anyway, so that's what I said. I don't know if as much as a pivot. I will tell you the one thing going to Ignatius did open up, and I shared this with Lori, was the music that you would hear that Herb Kent was playing, the music that I heard on DAI years before, the kids at Ignatius were going to First Impressions and Blue Gargoyle and, loft
Yeah.
parties and those things. And it was, and Sawyer's, which, obviously was, and it was like, this is my tribe. This is the music that really, really stirred my soul. And so that I was a party goer until they found out what I was, I was kind of doing the same thing on the West Side. And then next thing
Mhm.
you know, I'm playing at Sawyer's, I'm playing at First Impressions, I'm playing at those same parties.
What I'm curious about, there was a legendary West Side venue in the Da Vinci Manor. Um, Tell me about your history with Da Vinci Manor.
Well, my history was I was not a resident there. The residents there were Eric the Wiz, Incredible Ernest, and they were the residents. But every once in a while they would bring in other DJs, and I was always fortunate to be one of the ones that would get a call. We typically did not. Resurrection. One of the things we always did was if Da Vinci held their parties on holidays, they held their parties, really big events. We always held ours the week after, and it wasn't because we just didn't want to go up against it. It was like I was kind of a lazy promoter. It's like, well, why would I go out and have to keep driving to all these schools to pass out flyers when I can just hang out at Da Vinci's and do that? But Da Vinci's was a when uh, the young, and I can't necessarily call it house crowd because at that point the house was still emerging a bit. We were playing a lot of Italian disco. Um, and it was we called it a house crowd, we called it preppy crowd, but we really hadn't started making our music at that point. um, and prior to that there were a lot of Latin parties there, a lot of sunset promotions. They would do a lot of stuff there with Matt Warren and Carlos Valderrama, and they were doing stuff there before. They were doing a lot of Latin bands,
Yes.
and so it was harder to get in there because there was so many things going on. But as the neighborhood changed, the clientele changed, and Da Vinci's was a big Da Vinci's in the Factory. Factory was every Saturday,
Okay.
and it was they always did great numbers there. Slightly different crowd, not really close to Rez, probably I don't know, maybe 3-4 blocks, and did a couple parties there. And But it was funny because you get into the poster wars, which I won't get into that. We won't talk about that from the promotion side. The poster wars,
Yes.
uh, which is a whole nother thing. You guys probably talk ad nauseum about that.
We, well, we've got a collection or access to some collections of posters that had gone up during part of that era. Of course, no one necessarily had the vision of foresight to see how historically relevant those artifacts would become, but definitely it felt uniquely Chicago, right? To have street signs go up, a few days before the weekend to get those audiences to your respective parties. I want to pivot a bit and ask you about the production journey and how you discovered, the opportunity of leaning into this Chicago-based record making, because you guys
Yeah.
had you have a giant one, a classic.
Yeah, it's again kind of reluctant, and being at the kind of at the right place at the right time, and you know I I really try to give credit where credit is due, and we don't talk enough about the influence of the playground and the candy store. Um, I know you guys have on this show, but I think for some reason that gets lost. There's a lot, always a lot of talk about the music box and the warehouse, but if you were not old enough, or you missed the warehouse on Jefferson Street, or I mean, Music Box was was the 16th of Indiana. Um, you probably could get in there, but for many, I'll say kids, maybe a little younger than me, yeah, slightly younger than me, because I DJ'd there when I was in college, actually. That is the place where they really, got exposed to the culture, and the same applies for DJs. So Farley and Jesse, residents in the playground, and DJs, we would hang out there because they'd have 2,000 kids, and if they did bi-level, and people can, I'm sure you've had folks on here tell you the stories of what it was like there, right? But DJs would hang out there, so you would be in the booth at any point, and Steve, Eric Taylor, Lil John, Leonard Roy. I mean, we all would just kind of hang around, and Jesse made a record.
Yeah.
And that was, I got it, I mean, there's all these folks want to talk about it. It's like that was the thing. It's like, if Jesse can make a record, and even still trying to figure it out, I give Larry Thompson, my former partner, a lot of credit, because he was the one. We were, it'd been DJing at Rainbow, um, up north, and Larry kept saying, "Man, we got to make a record. We got to make a record," and we didn't know how to make a record. And and so we met Adonis, who's on the west side,
Yeah.
and we came to him with our ideas. And I know somebody's got the tape of the original "Can't Stop the House" before I wrote the lyrics. That is just, it's it's special, I'll say that. And hopefully it
you
never sees the
you're gonna have
light
to
of day.
elaborate on
Yeah,
that.
it's special, but we really didn't know what we were doing, and Adonis was learning. And Adonis had kind of found his way, and that was, for me, like I said, being naturally inquisitive, just having ideas and trying to learn how to get them out. And that's where the journey started. And for me, it was, we spent a lot of money with a lot of engineers, but I was always a sponge, right? Just asking them how they do this, how they do that, learning how to edit tape.
That
uh you know
inquisitive nature of yours.
yeah, just learning how to work in the studio. And it just kind of grew, and you could see over time, even the raw sound that we started with, and how as we progressed, we started to learn a little bit more about what we could do in the studio, and we grew, and that was that journey. But I give it, I think a big part of it, I mean, there's so many seeds that were planted, whether it be Herb Kent, whether it be Jesse and Farley at the music box, I mean the music box, at the candy
Playground.
store, playground candy store.
Yeah.
um and didn't have an opportunity to come in and play behind there with, once was working with Keith and Steve. And I don't know, have you guys ever done a show on the playground candy store?
Not exclusively on those venues, but
Oh
we
man, that's a
we try
show.
we try to focus on, the individuals who can tell the
Yeah.
stories,
Yeah.
but about those venues. But absolutely, I think all uh, like a top five venue show would be
Yeah.
apropos for sure. And um, we've got in the comments watching the show a lot of people who were there. Kevin McSwain checking in, uh,
Oh
Hatley
yeah.
Patrick,
Hmm.
Scott Lee, and Reggie Davenport. Thanks for checking in. So, of course, Chauncey Alexander also dropped a note.
And Gary Wallace. I see
And
him on here.
well, yes, we
We'll
had
talk
a
about him in a
nickname
second.
for Gary, but that that crew that has joined us certainly they're sort of proverbially nodding their head to everything you're sharing. In fact, Kevin McSwain dropped his list of venues in the chat here.
A lot of places out west that
Yeah,
don't get talked about, and I mean, it's like, we talk about Da Vinci's and the Factory and
yeah,
Reds and Firehouse, and but
yeah.
you know,
Crystal Palace is
yeah, but we had Flight Zone, we had St. Peter's, and up on North Avenue. Yeah, so it's the 7 grand someone put. Yeah, it's a lot of great venues, and I mean, I start to show my age because I worry about these kids now, because it's like,
they
we
don't
had
have.
yeah, man, we had places to go, and we would leave sweaty,
We
but man, okay.
as a South Side guy, growing up and attending parties and then making my way progressively north, I am always fascinated to learn about some of the other venues around the city, particularly on the west side. And so Larry Thompson, love that brother as well. You uh, Gary Wallace. Um, after Can't Stop the House, you and Larry did the Lenoir combination. For those tuning in, uh, I'm sure you've heard of this consummate classic, "Work It to the Bone." Um, you guys got a deal for that record after releasing it independently. Talk about what that journey was like and then what it led to.
Right. Well, it's, again, the music industry is very different. I was sharing with someone, we were in I was in Miami this year, just during Miami Music Week, and it's very different from years ago, decades ago, when we go down there, because there was so much business being done. But a record in Chicago in the late 80s or 90s, you could actually uh, license that record to the individual territory. So, and the territories are different sizes. So Italy was one size, Great Britain, Benelux, which is, I think, France, Belgium. You had Germany, um, and you could take one song and you can license it in 5, 6 different territories, like doing 5, 6 different deals. You can't do that now. You have, the EU, like all this, all of it's kind of bundled together, and we're in the digital realm. So most of the stuff now is available. Once it's on the web, it's on the web. So it's very different. But we were, a reluctant record label. We were, and it kind of gets into the story of Mirage. Once, I mentioned working with Adonis, and him producing, helping us produce the Can't Stop the House, and us, actually shopping that record to Chicago Tracks. And there was an offer from Chicago Tracks that was laughable. And I remember, again, Larry Thompson saying, we need to start a record label. We didn't know anything about starting a record. We didn't know a record label. And I think I shared this story previously, and, shout out to Ray Barney. But uh,
Yes.
yeah, we didn't we we went to disc makers, paid premium to get the records pressed and had them shipped to my house. So I had this big, you know, uh, freight truck in my, on a residential street,
Pulling up.
unload a skid of 3,000 record, 2,500 I think was the first order, and then I got to get them over to Barney's, and they sold out in a weekend. And so now we're in the record business, and Ray was our distributor, and he would basically distribute to the stores out east, the distributors out east. um, and one of the things that he we were kind of we were growing, and we were doing a couple other records, and Ray said, you can do this yourself. And it came at a time when we were looking around, and there was just a lot of bad business, and and I'm not to disparage, I mean, but there was a lot of bad business. There was, folks that had done deals with other entities in Chicago that did not afford them the opportunity to hold on to their rights. And so, that's kind of how we grew into Mirage. You asked about the deal. So we did a deal with for Work to Bone with Profile Records.
Yeah.
And it was, when we had already kind of, really exploited the record as much as you can, because we had licensed it in several territories already. So what they got was the rest of the world. But it gave us an opportunity to really start to work, obviously working through a New York record label. This is the, record label of, uh, Rob
Sharon
Bass
Brown
and Sharon Brown, right? I
yeah,
Specialized Love, but they were also doing a lot of hip hop. They were doing Run DMC and
right.
some of
Yeah.
that stuff. But it opened up a lot of doors. I mean, ultimately, we talked about Gary. Gary did a record with Sleeping Bag, right, which
Hmm.
is very similar in New York independent. Um, and it really kind of elevated our profile, if you will, no pun intended. Um, but it let us know that there was so much more out here. And so this is kind of how we got into the origin stories of Mirage, because we wanted to do
So
more.
I got to interrupt for a second, because the Mirage story isn't as often told. So I think we need to do a little bit of a setup. Mirage Entertainment and what it was and what it became in terms of the business of ensuring all of those things that you were describing were protected, from publishing, and writers' rights, and the distribution and manufacturing, mechanical fees, and all those things. So, group of people came together, formed this company, Mirage. Is that good
Yeah.
summary? Okay.
No, that's it. I mean, it was strength in numbers. There were basically three, well, really four record labels, because we had just started a second record label, Nightclub Records, which we'll talk about Black Tracks, I'm sure. But it
Mm,
was our label.
mm,
Oh,
mm, mm,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
it was our label, House
Oh.
Jam. Yeah, it was Gary's label, House in Effect. It was George Andros's label, which at the time was Tempest Records. Yes, Tempest Records. And we had just started Nightclub Records, because what we found, and this is, and it's not that different from, because you're seeing a resurgence in vinyl. Um, distributors would only pay you if you had another record.
Yeah,
And
that's the only way
so,
you could get. I remember you guys on the phone
yeah, you
all
could
the
only get
time.
right. You were only gonna get paid if you had another record. So if you think about it, for Gary or for George or for me and Larry to continue to put record, I mean, you gotta be putting out a record, every other week to keep, that flow coming. But if under the umbrella of one entity, you always had a record, because if we didn't have a record one month, Gary had a record or George had a record. And it was always something that, those distributors in New York, because I got to tell you, and this is going to sound, there was a couple of distributors in New York who actually had like taken some record companies out of business, because they did not pay them. They would
Right.
order 4,000 records and then return them all, and then you're stuck with them, and it's just, so you had to try to level the playing field and get some leverage. For labels like Trax and DJ International, they were able to do that internally. But what we did was find a way and basically try to show Chicago that there was another avenue. And again, I give Ray credit for it, because he said this is how he basically schooled us. This is what you need to do. This is who you want to talk to. Nope, don't do it that way. You need to do this way. Here are the terms you want to set. And that's the origin of Mirage. It initially started out solely as just a way to pull together our product to be able to get leverage with the large distributors in the East Coast and the exporters, really the exporters, because they're the ones that would hurt you. And we were very successful in doing that. We made, and you were part of you were a big part of that, Kevin. I have to tell you.
So full disclosure and transparency. Yes, I was what some might call an ex officio member of Mirage Entertainment, but I had residency in the offices at 700 North Green Street. I even shared space with Mary Datcher at
Mary Thatcher.
one
That's right.
time. Um, we provided all the promotion and the PR for the releases, and help ensure that the uh, dance music reports and Billboard and Street Sound magazines and Mix Mag and DJ Times were covering these releases so that we could amplify what was happening in Chicago, and certainly at Mirage Entertainment. And so it was definitely an honor to be a part
We
of that
didn't
team.
know. Yeah, we didn't know what a press release was. We didn't know, we didn't know how to, and you really helped us with a lot of that. And so when I say reluctant, I use that term more than once. There was really a lot of growing pains in this in that journey, and really in all of it. And um, one of the things that's mildly disappointing, I think, is so often there are folks that will let they want to let on, or at least give the appearance that they just kind of came out the womb and they had it all. They were, producing, they understood, the legal side of the industry. They, were, and it's, we have to give credit, and, to those folks that really, tried to open doors and be sharing, because not everybody was. I can tell some stories of people who were supposedly my friends, who I later would find out. There'd be folks from Europe. They'd be here for 2 weeks. They'd say, "Yeah, I was looking for you. They told me you were out of town, or we wanted to come visit you, but no one had your phone number." Well, who were you with? I won't mention the names of the people they were with, but it was the same folks that they knew us. But back then it was, you had folks that would just want to, if you had someone here from Germany with a checkbook, or from England with a checkbook looking at licensed music, they were going to keep them to themselves, even though they're asking to, where's Terry Baldwin?
Yeah,
Where's Mark Imperial?
yeah.
Where's Armando? I'd like to meet Armando. I'd like to meet, Thompson and Lenoir. And it's like, oh, you don't need to meet them. You just need to stay here with us and let us keep playing you the stuff we have. And that was very disappointing. But what we wanted to do was kind of break that mold. And I think, the Mirage story, uh, although there are things that occurred that would probably weren't, that we strayed, and whether it be for different reasons and different personalities or what have you, that people left and started to do their own thing. But I think back to, and you remember the folks that would come down there, a young, you know Curtis Jones, Cashmere, before he was Cashmere, learning
Yes,
how to, when he wanted to set up Casual Records, and Hula, and Jeff Craven from Large, and
large.
all
Yeah.
these folks, and we would share with them. This is the same things Ray Barney shared with us. We'd share with them. Here are the folks
You
you want to talk to. Here are the folks you don't want to talk to.
You all were absolutely genuine and authentic, and obviously, I feel you remain that way, which is why I have you on telling these stories. We're the Vintage House Show. We're pretty far through our interview with uh, producer, remixer, label owner, and operator Rick Lenoir, and certainly former DJ. We can't leave that out. Coming up in our discussion, we're going to talk a little bit about what Rick's up and coming and current projects are, because he's still strong in the game, and we are excited to hear more about what he's doing. But currently, we're revisiting some of the important history. I got to tell a quick story, if I may, about exactly what you were sharing around the fact that you all shared what was instilled in you. And there was a point where, uh, the expression, uh, the highest form of flattery is um, duplication, or however that expression
Imitation.
goes,
Yeah.
imitation. And so there were a lot of what I called camps, similar to Mirage, that had sprung up, and there were pools of teams working together, these camps working together, and we actually figured out, to your point earlier about the exporters, we figured out that they were coming to New York and to Florida for those music conferences, New Music Seminar in New York, Winter Music Conference in Miami. And so we pooled resources and created a hospitality suite and invited these European licensors and others to come in, and we played the music for them. We actually had some in hotel room performances.
We
I
did.
remember Dajay and uh, Lil Jon's song with
Yeah, with Ulysses. I'm leaving
Ulysses,
you. Yep.
Pete,
Yep.
playing, yeah, losing, le-
Yep.
uh,
I'm leaving you.
I'm leaving you. Thank you.
Yes. No.
Um,
With with Ulysses and the Lazy Boy,
Wayne and
Dwayne and
Chauncey, and
Chauncey. Yes. Yes.
um, and so, yeah, again, we've got those receipts, and I always challenge people when they talk about, you know, the gaps or the chasms between people in this community. There might have been some, but there were more instances of people coming together and working together. I remember Steve and Andre
Audrey Hallman.
Holman. They
Yeah.
came up to the hospitality suite. We welcomed them in, and they were cutting deals. And
I mean,
um,
that picture, there's a picture floating around. It's on one of our social media pages, but it says so much because I think Hula's on there, Braxton,
Braxton
uh,
Holmes,
yeah,
Hula.
we're on there. I think Lil John maybe, I think Wayne. I mean, it's just, but it's the thing, we were a community, and we
Yeah,
were looking to, and we did try to pull each other up, and and it's funny, it was a competition, but it wasn't a competition. It was, if you know Clubhouse had a banger, Braxton was going to do a remix on one of our records. I'm like, hey, you need to get over here and do this. It was, it just, man, it is very different, I guess. And I guess the same thing occurs everywhere, but it was a special time to be able to do that. And you would think as, um, you know, competitive as the industry was, for us to kind of put ego aside, and all those camps to come together, and no one was hiding deals. It was like, I mean, I remember getting phone calls like, man, you need to talk to so and so, he's here from Japan, or really, oh, okay, tell him to come by the office.
Yep.
Where's he at? And we did that. We would call each other and say, you need to talk to this person, but somewhere it went left.
Well, it did, but again, this is why we get to collect these first person narratives so that we have a recorded history of what people experience and the learnings. And just another side note, Mirage Entertainment was strategically located in the River North area. 1015 North Halstead was not far away down the street. And even closer was another venue that isn't talked about a lot, but a little bit, Kaboom
Yeah,
nightclub.
yeah.
And there was also the Byron Stingley and team of 10 City, and a night that not only did the labels work together
Oh, this right here.
uh, in some of those business opportunities, but they were also promoting nights, and we had a night called the Post Office, if you
Yeah.
remember that one.
Yeah, we tried to start a service night, like an industry night,
Yes,
which was really, and that speaks to, those types of events were for the community. It was not to enrich one person or one camp. It was absolutely for the community. A showcase for artists. It was
that
different.
was yeah,
Yeah, it was, it was, it
that was
was,
big.
yeah,
I
to be able to, yeah, man, I'm smiling thinking about it. Um, and it's probably one of the reasons why I'm still, still producing and still spending time in the studio. But yeah,
that
the other thing we had, you're right, and being in the River North area because you were a stone's throw from, to get over to, whether it be shelter. You could,
oh
we,
yeah, the
yeah, we
Shelter
used to
China
bounce.
Club.
Yeah, China Club. You could bounce around. I'm trying to remember the one that was up the street from when I opened up my second studio on Kingsbury, and I can't remember the name of the one. Dennis
Oh,
Rodman.
Crowbar.
Crowbar, right? I could.
Yes,
We were
yes.
going to see, Terry and Val play there.
Yeah, and
And then,
Frankie on the 4th of July. And
yeah, right up the street.
yeah,
And part of the reason why when I moved, and had to, decided to move out my house and open up another studio, I moved to an area like that was because of what we had at 700 Green. And I love the idea of being able to um, just, if you work in the studio on Friday, it's 2 in the morning and you just want to just hear some music, I could just walk down the street to Crowbar
literally.
and
Yeah,
just be there for like 20, 30 minutes. And, Ralphie Rosario might be DJing or whatever, Val or whatever, and just hear. And then go back to the studio and then, stay till the sun comes up. And we would do that at 700 Green. We would, you know, um,
roll out the sleeping bags.
yeah, yeah, man. So it was really, just great, great, and even Cash, when he opened up in that area.
On Branch, yeah,
Yeah,
on Branch
yeah.
Street.
So there was it's just a great area. You go down there now, and it's I can't even use the term gentrification. It's like gentrification on steroids. It's bananas.
Well, I want to ensure that we get a chance to learn about uh, Rick Lenoir 2025. And again, thanks for everybody that has tuned in. DJ Purple, um, we've got Gary, or he's got so many names. G Money.
G Money,
Yeah. uh, I am.
Kevin McSwain,
Yep. Kevin
yep,
and Chauncey.
Resurrection, yep.
You're bringing them out the woodworks, Rick.
Yeah, and Chauncey. So and I I tell a story. I met Chauncey at Lewis University, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
just uh, he and Wayne for their freshman year. It's probably my third year, I think. And I remember I had turntables in my dorm. I'm not going to embarrass Chauncey with the with the stories of uh Chauncey, don't you have class? Chauncey be in my dorm room mixes like uh so we had some great times there and made some great friendships.
Bit, there's some folks that came through Mirage in one shape or form or another. So last bit about Mirage, but um, Terry Hunter and Aaron Smith had
Yes.
UBQ Productions. They were cranking out tunes, and in fact, I got my first and only remix on a UBQ Productions "When I Fell in Love" with Kathy Summers mix.
Yep.
We had Ron Caro come
Ron
through,
Carroll, Big Ed,
Big
Jordan
Ed,
Fields, Bernard Beatty.
uh,
Yeah, just yeah, we had
Ron Trent, Ron
yeah,
Trent.
just watching young, I won't say young talent because that makes me sound like I'm very, very old, but just watching
Yeah,
these folks come on the scene and watch them grow into, and then even now to look back, and I made the comment on social media. I did, I did a record with Ron and Ed. We co-wrote this song, we put it out, and just working on it with them, I had so much respect for them because you could tell they were still trying to figure it out. And But I was like, wow, these guys are really good. And so um, Dave Lee just re-released it on a compilation, and it just brought back the memories of working through that record. What can you do for me?
yeah,
Yeah, so it was, but just even watching folks continue to grow, and it was just really
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Lo- Love that. And we said we were going to talk about Black Tracks, but we'll have to do that on another episode. Uh,
Well, I
uh,
mean, the thing I'll say is about Black Tracks, and Gary. There's probably we don't go a quarter. We can't go 3 months without Gary asking me, because or someone stop. Hell, we were in Florida, and someone asked me about Black Tracks, and Black Tracks again was one of those things that we started again to get leverage. And the first Black Tracks was just kind of Larry and I putting together a compilation of tracks of what will we play as DJs, right? Because we was at heart we're still DJs.
yes.
Um, and
What
so
would you
that's why
play?
Black Tracks One, there's like the pressing is real low because the sides run like 18 minutes. We weren't thinking it through. We figured it out as we went along. But what we realized with Black Tracks One and then subsequently Black Tracks Two was that wow, this there's a market for this, and it really helped us keep our float. Because the distributors, the exporters, they couldn't get enough of it.
Yes.
So we ultimately started a second series, the Track Work series. But Black Tracks just kind of grew into this thing on its own, and it was, I won't say it started out as a fluke, but it was just kind of, oh, we'll put these tracks together, and it basically was an album, but we sold it at an EP price.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was the other appeal to it because you had, tracks on there for every DJ, whether you played in a, really like B96 type crowd or you play for a really deep New York, underground type crowd
Cool.
or,
Yep.
you know, there was a little something for everybody. And yeah, and so that's the kind of
I refer to it as the Fast and Furious franchise of house music, right?
It was. Yeah, we were that's yeah, that's it. We were, I don't think we jumped the shark quite as severely as Fast and Furious franchise has, but we got close. But uh
Absolutely.
yeah, no, that it was
So,
great times.
so you took away from those earlier experiences, the 80s, 90s, and beyond, and you are still applying that knowledge now as a solo producer, but collaborating with others uh, is it Patina Sky Productions or
Yeah, Patina Sky Records is the label.
okay,
The production company is Pure Soul, and
Pure Soul.
yeah, and again, I wasn't looking to start another record label. life happens, right? And so
Yeah, indeed.
after Mirage, I had to kind of reassess some things, and kind of retrenched, and I had just had a son, and so it was kind of changing, kind of how I saw the world, and responsibility, and those types of things. And then you get into your kids are growing up, so now you're going to soccer games, and you're coaching, and you're doing those things, and you look up, and 10 years has passed, 15 years have passed, right? But you
Yes.
always still love the music. Um, and so it was kind of uh, having that desire to continue to do music. I had started a production company where I mentioned Rich Green. It passed away. um, and just kind of had a bunch of stuff in mothballs. And then I got to a point where I had a ton of space in my home, and said, you know what, I'm going to put up a little production room just to dabble. And it just shows you how God works. I mentioned that to a friend who was doing music. He called about something totally different. Brian Pope, DJ Pope. Shout out to Pope. And and I'd been, next thing I'm doing some things with with his label, with Poji, and with Randall Montgomery's label, Shinola. And I was enjoying working on stuff, just kind of working on other people's projects, not really looking to start a label. But as with anything, you want to grow, you want to stretch a little bit. And next thing you know, I kind of had projects I wanted to put out that didn't necessarily work for the labels I had been kind of working with. So that's how Patina Sky got started. That was it.
I I'm thrilled that you're back, and uh, I want to get the old band, back together again, and it's already happening. I understand, you and Gary uh, have been spending time in your studio and collaborating, and I'm happy about it. I'm thrilled about it, and so happy that I want to join in on that activity where I can. But how can folks check out some of the releases that you've already dropped?
Sure. And on all the platforms, looking at getting back into some vinyl shortly. But obviously, the Patina Sky, there's a website for patinaskymusic.com. There's a Bandcamp site. Have had the opportunity, I know we're running out of time, but I have to say, to work with just some really great artists that I didn't see coming. But just kind of having a chance to work with some folks that I think the world of: Courtney LaFloy out of Atlanta, and Ed Ramsey in Baltimore. And Ed, just a really, really talented brother. Um, and and doing a lot of concept stuff too that I like to do. So I'm revisiting an old house jam project, the Sanctuary project that I did almost, was it 30 years? And so I'm doing a volume 2, and that is actually, it's up on Traxsource for pre-order, but it'll be out in a couple weeks, and coming to all your streaming services. And that's just me kind of having ideas. I'm just I have so many different influences, and I want to bring all those things through. I'm working on another album. Um, and Gary and I are working on a number of projects. Gary's got some stuff that's coming that's going to really just blow people away. Um,
Yeah,
and
he's been doing that damn thing in Charlotte with his release series and bringing a bunch of people through. Again, I've got another bone to pick there because I was living in Charlotte, left to come back to Chicago, and then Gary comes to Charlotte
yeah,
and drives the house scene there crazy and
I got to tell
bananas.
you, I love going down there. I told him tonight, because he's got a couple events coming up. I said, man, send me those dates, because I'll just hop on a plane and go. And he knows I've been there, and I'm just listening to music, sitting on the back, smoking my cigar. Just it's a really nice, it's a
It's a
vibe.
good.
It's a
It's a.
really
It is a
nice scene,
vibe
and they got a lot of transplants, Jersey, Baltimore,
for sure.
up and down the East Coast that are all kind of in that Charlotte area, and it's just a great scene there.
I I want to thank Antonio Wu Tang for dropping in on the show. DJ Cliff Towns, who has also been a recent guest this year on Vintage House Show and has returned to the art and craft of DJing. And here's one for you, Rick. DJ John Young had dropped in to the show. And if you recall,
What's right?
yeah, well, yeah, you guys were holding it down, but one of the Mirage pilot projects, if you will,
Yes.
that I got to embark on with you guys was to try to launch a hip hop label,
Yeah.
Funky Ride Recordings, and our first signed artist was a group called Fruit of the Mind,
FOM.
and and that group was comprised of John Young and a guy. Some of you who may watch a few movies like Above the Rim might know
The Wire.
Wood Harris,
Yeah. Yeah.
who he and his brother both made it as
Both
great
both
actors in Hollywood.
both from Resurrection. I got to
Both
put that in there.
both from
Yep.
Resurrection,
Stephen
absolutely.
Wood, Res alum.
Yeah, so Gary remembers Funky Ride recordings.
Yeah. Yeah.
We only, I think it got um the only media it was released on was cassette, and that was for promotional purposes. I still have my Funky Ride recordings cassette, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked John, like, what, well, the biggest issue was Six Wings and Jet, which was the hot heat
That
on
was
that.
nice. That was nice.
It sampled a song we had no budget to get clearance on that sample in order to.
Did anybody get clearance back then? I mean, it's. I've seen so many podcasts now with like a lot of those artists from the '90s talking about, they never saw any residuals because once the samples, the lawsuits started flying and the cease and desist and all those things. Um, the
It
the
was, you couldn't
the
stop it.
song, yeah, the song was carved up in such a way that it's like they got a fraction of a fraction, you
Yeah.
know. So, but yeah, I think yeah, really great times. I'm smiling just remembering some of that stuff, and it's yeah.
And so we are now shifting to sort of the after the show chat, and we still actually, according to our producer, our in studio at WNUR 89.3 FM Evanston, Chicago, and HD1. We've got Mateo Acevala in studio, and he's saying, we're still clear for broadcast. And of course, stay with us here on the stream for a great episode of the Vintage House Show. Every Wednesday night, we're here at 10 p.m. Central, getting the first-hand stories. We're not like hearsay, right? We get the pioneering figures of the movement to talk about their experiences and contributions to house. So continue to drop questions and comments in for our guest tonight, Rick Lenoir, and Gary. Well, he's having his own. He's setting up deals in the
Yeah.
chat. Uh,
I discovered the chat and I saw a question that Scott Lee had asked earlier about the role that urban record stores played in distributing music. I don't know if Scott's still on, but I wanted to, hopefully if he is, I feel bad. I didn't notice it earlier and now it's 30 minutes later. I can answer the question. Yes. So, there were two big one stops here in Chicago. There was Fletcher's and Barney's.
yeah.
Um, and we were very connected to Barney's. Our records were in those stores. Were in all the. It's funny because it's. I've been spending a lot of time in Detroit, and there was one stop up there that would buy right, that would get our records in all of those mom and pop stores in the hood, in the neighborhood. Um, and so yeah, we were in George's, and they were instrumental because you had a record like Can't Stop the House that got a lot of mix play, um, on the mix shows. um, the folks, it drove folks to the record stores for it, so it kind of broken out of the clubs. The club DJs, we went to Imports, we went to Loops, we went to Gramophone. um, Later Hot Jams, the one in the Brickyard, what was it? Hot Mix, I think it was the name of it. So other stores popped up, Rose Records. Um, but that's where the DJs went. But when you get that one record or two records that popped onto the mix rotation, you're gonna need to have it in those the coops, the George's music rooms, Pimp Mo's on the west side. See there, Max. I'm a west side guy, so I gotta give Mac it, so I'm sorry. I
Not the
just
one.
I did, that's the way, that's the way I
Yeah.
roll. But
No apologies needed. We
yeah,
we encompass, again, house is a Chicago thing, and
yeah,
even though we're broken up into the West Side, South Side, North Side, much like hip hop in New York, right? You had
yeah.
Brooklyn, Queens.
So
Uh,
Patrick put Out of the Past, and I gotta tell you, man, Patrick, see, we're from the West Side. Know Kevin know too. You found some heaters and Out of the Past.
yeah.
And you talk to cats that were from out west, they would tell you could find some. I mean, I found some gems there. Yeah, yeah. So it's, yeah, definitely it's good times.
So yep, Cliff shouts out that I think it was the Comfort Zone where
Yep.
you and Gary were on Chicago Avenue. And I was going to ask you about Keith and who was his partner?
Steve.
The Keith
Steve
and
Dorr.
Steve, right?
Yep.
You
Keith
said,
Edwards, Steve Dorr.
well, the big
Park.
was Steve the big guy,
That was Richard. So at the club, yeah, Keith and Richard were the owners of
right?
Comfort
Right.
Zone, right? But
Okay.
when I go back to Park Avenue, it was Steve and Keith. But
Yes. 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 Okay.
yeah, it was now, and it's interesting. That wasn't Gary. Gary and I first were residents, co-resident. Well, we really weren't co-residents at that time. Well, we kind of were. I don't know, Gary. Gary can remind me if we used to split nights, but we worked at Heroes, which later
Yes. That's
became on
that.
the tragic E2.
E2.
But yeah,
Good
when it
meet.
was Heroes, and I had DJ'd there previously when it was La Mirage, even before that. But
Yes. We
that
did
was
do a show about that with Matrix.
okay.
We had him on
Yeah.
because they
So
had just torn down the building. It's gone.
yeah, yeah. So that's the thing. Gary and I had some history as working together, and we worked real well together. And then Gary's always had great residence. He was at AKA's. He's always had great residences. So, but
Yeah.
Comfort Zone was cool because it was our place, so we didn't have to I could, lock my records in the basement if I want to and not have to tote them out. And then the other beauty of it was 700 North Green was right up the street. So
Yep.
it was just very convenient. Everything was just kind of right there. It was really, really cool time.
So I want to shift again while I have you, but this is about summertime Chicago. So it's usually an amazing time for outdoor events. There's picnics and festivals always. Of course, coming up, one of the sort of premier or tentpole events is the Chosen Few picnic in Jackson Park. Will you be there this year?
Um, So it's a little early to say. I suspect I will probably be at some of the events surrounding it.
Okay.
I I wasn't there last year. I don't think. I think maybe the year before. I was there for a little while, but
I probably
yeah,
missed.
I enjoy it. It's it's great. I see a lot of folks that I went to high school with, college with, and then it is like seeing a lot of industry folks that are there. It's overwhelming. So you know part of the challenge I have is I'm a bit of an introvert, so I don't really go out a lot. I am starting to go out a little more, and I know I need to do that. And I've been told I need to do that. I need to be seen. I need to come out.
We had that
Um,
conversation too.
yeah, and that's not and people confuse that with me. They is it's like that. I'm I don't want to say uh, conceited or something. It's not that. I just don't I've never been really comfortable in large crowds as much as I've DJed in front of thousands of people, and I'm more comfortable just at home, with a book or maybe in the studio, just it's different, or
It
s- yeah.
again, it's okay, and this is one of the things to call out about our house music community, right? It is comprised of people with different personalities, different levels of creativity and interest, and so please don't be apologetic coming from someone whose obligations don't allow for him to get out as much as I would otherwise like to as well. So
But I have to
I
admit, a couple
yeah,
weeks ago I went by Ron Carroll's event on the Wednesday night, which he's got one tonight, and I was there for a little bit, and then I actually stopped by and Jordan Fields does something the first Wednesday of the month downtown. I stopped by there because I was out. I happened to be in the city. And I say that, and I know Kevin's like, well, you haven't been to Reynolds, and you keep telling me you're going to come to Reynolds, right? Uh, uh, but I really had a good time. I had a good time, and it made me realize that and it's not for not being invited or whatever. I mean, it's the rooftop parties, and I get like, man, you should come out. You should get, and I will. And I have to say, you mentioned about being the Chicago and the outdoor. I have not been to any of the lakefront beach events, but I've seen them on social media, and it is
they're pretty phenomenal.
I got emotional. I have to tell you because my city is the bomb. Chicago is there's nowhere else that you can do that. People, it's like maybe Ibiza, right? I mean, we have
Maybe.
this gorgeous lakefront right here. It's not an ocean, but it might as well be. And I'm looking at folks having a good time, and it is that it is what I really Chicago is we got some flaws, some things that we got to fix, and we have to get continue to try to get the youth involved and grow our music, and
Yes.
we're not getting any younger, but just love seeing some of those events that are um uh are taking place outside. It's we got a cool city, man.
It it is. Excuse me, allergies kicking in now. Summer, Chicago by the lakefront, the city by the lake,
Hmm.
the home of house music. Um, we are the Condé Nast best big city for 8 years in a row for a reason, and I'd like to attest that house music is a big part of that, and again, part of the mission of myself, DJ Lori Branch, Lauren Lowry, and our entire Vintage House Show team including super duper producer tonight, Mateo Asavala. We are working to try to put these stories forth again by people who are able to tell their own stories so that no one's coming in and usurping the magic and the creativity that this movement has birthed. And so, for all those tuned in, we're grateful that you trust us to get these stories told, and that people like Rick Lenoir trust us to come and share the story with us. Uh, as there's a lot of places or a lot of opportunities for people to share those stories. So
And,
we are here with Rick Lenoir. Uh, go forward, Rick.
yeah, I was just going to piggyback on that and say, and one thing, I'm unapologetically Chicago. I support Chicago artists, in house and all of our flavors, whether it be footwork, juke, ghetto, uh, deep house, Afro, soulful, acid. I'm gonna rep Chicago.
Love that.
And I'm just that's just who I am. I'm proud of the folks that have come because a lot of these folks I don't know. I see producers and artists and everybody. I'm you know I hate the term OG because it's like I don't think I'm that old, but okay. But people like the OG house OG, but I do uh uh want to just kind of appeal. Like we've got to um realize that we have something very special, and folks are really quick to put their nose up and say, well, that's not my flavor, or I'm not going to support that promoter or that DJ. And we really have to we gotta get away from that. We
Yeah.
gotta just say, if you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say anything. But we need to continue to grow and support our scene. And if it's not your flavor, that's fine. You don't have to say, "Oh man, they playing this." They just playing them Afro. I ain't going over there. No, look, if people are dancing, hear what I'm saying. If people are dancing, and they're dancing in Chicago, and they're dancing, and it's a 4/4, it's ours.
We own it.
We own
And
it.
I that reminds me, one of the production companies that was housed within Mirage Entertainment was called Four on the Floor
On the
Productions.
floor, right?
And
But
so, but yes, your point is well taken and received. And one of the things that I think was a opportunity for us to discuss was about sort of the community. I wanted to circle the wagons around this notion, and you were just talking about people dancing, and if a DJ can move the dance floor, they're doing the darn thing. The people on the dance floor, I've been, to your point about looking at videos and images on social media, these are beyond middle-aged people now that are out there in a lot of the instances, and they're moving. I mean, dance obviously is a great form of exercise, um, but how do we continue to endear the next generations? Like, there's the 40 and 30-year olds need to be on it, to forget even before we get down to the 20-year olds. how
mhm.
do we how do we drive the
So
sustainability of the
no,
genre?
it's a great question, and I think this is where we need the sociologists, um, the to to come and help us understand crowd behavior, right?
Yes.
Um, I do think. we do lead by example, and the point that you just made, those images, you'll have folks, they'll say, oh, well, that's old folks music or younger folks or whatever. And I I think, you know, something really, it was just several years ago, I was at Chosen Few. I had my son with me, and he's 25 now, 25, 26, something like that. And 25. I know how old my kids are. He's he's 25. Um, and it was pretty cool because I was there. They had given me an award, and I had my son and my wife with me. My son, he'd gone to Lollapalooza, and he was blown away by Chosen Few. And at that time, he might have been, I don't know, 19, 18, 19 maybe.
Yeah.
And he was just, um, and I can see why, because yes, there are a lot of folks of a certain age there, but there are also folks younger, folks with their families,
Yeah.
and to see, uh, and to see a predominantly black crowd, no fights, no, nobody, having to worry about I'm going to the trunk, going to the
Yeah.
trunk to get, what it is. Uh, it is really something, especially as you come of age, to realize the value of that, how important that is, how special that is. When you're young, if you just only been around chaos, you expect more chaos. But I think all of us can remember a point where we grew up, and you go like, I don't want no more chaos, you know.
And there's too much to lose.
Right. And it's too much to lose. That is a very good point. So, the, of how do you start to have, where we can get, the younger folks, um, uh, to come, under this tent. I think the biggest thing is to not make it so exclusive. It's a blessing and a curse, because the thing about house music when it first started was its exclusivity, is
Yeah.
what was a driver, right? um I had a record that you didn't have, and I would black out the label so you wouldn't even know what it was, right? And then, and that was the ultimate sign of flattery, was someone go like, what is that? There was
Yeah.
no Shazam, right?
Right.
um, the exclusivity, the parties that were not mass promoted, that people just heard about, whether it be a loft party or, the rave parties, right? That weren't, Kevin can speak to that. There's something to be said about, our little secret. It's our little secret. But yet, we only think it's successful if there's thousands and thousands of people there. So it's
There's
somewhat
a
twisted.
dichotomy of sorts.
There
Yeah.
is, and
It's a
I think it
quandary.
just speaks to how complex we are as people, because we all want, you know to be in the know, but yet, we want it also to be popular.
No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting
Yeah. So I think
quandary, and
for
we want
yeah,
ownership and
yeah.
all of it.
So for us to look at how do you start to bring additional, you bring youth, and I think you have to, be more inviting, and we can't continue to be, um, we tend to turn our nose up at stuff. I think as adults we do that. I mean, I know what I like.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been walking the planet for a while now, and I know what I like, and I know what I don't like. Um, but if I have to have some patience to say, um, and if I want to have other people appreciate this, I have to be able to create a space where they have more than a moment to thumbs up or thumbs down. And so, you know I think, I love the outdoor events. I love that, we're doing those, and and hopefully we start to, see other promoters start to do things. I mean, there's a growing, like, for example, Afrobeat, not necessarily Afro house, but Afrobeat. You see a
Yeah,
lot of younger folks that are into Afrobeat,
absolutely. That's a
going to
good call.
parties, going to large parties.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. Now, there are folks that say, well, that's not house music. Yeah, it's not. But what it's showing is that folks can go someplace, and it's not, talking about shooting up a club, or, some, whatever, and start to operate on a more, um, um, I got to pick my words very carefully, on a plane that, where folks feel safe and they can actually have a good time.
Well,
So
it, some might claim, it's a derivative. Um, and then, there's also the arguments that house is certainly a conglomeration of many other genres. That's certainly a conversation for another show. I did want to reflect on this comment from Cliff Towns. Promoters keep booking the same DJs week after week after week. I wonder, does it make sense for DJs to go back to being promoters and DJs and finding their own, uh, you know, venues to create their own followings?
you look, I'm a big proponent of it. That's, I mean, and I know it's very different than when I started, but that's how I started. I promoted my own parties,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and built a following. Um, and then I was booked. This is the story I shared earlier. Where I got booked. I got, picked up a residency, because of a following I had built. And I tell folks, like, what, I think everybody wants something that's ready made, and
Turnkey is, yeah, I
turnkey
mean,
is, I think
instant gratification.
instant gratification, right? And what we know, it's funny. My wife and I'll be out at dinner, and I'll be at a restaurant, and I'll go. It's like, hmm, it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on a Friday, and there's nobody in here. If somebody enterprising came to this manager and said, "Look, you know, what's your bar doing right now? What if I guaranteed your bar would do that? Would double that? I just want to come set up my DJ setup, and have some people come charge a cover. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. And you may only have a place from 8 to midnight. Okay.
Yeah.
But you're building your crowd, and you have to start to, but everybody wants to start at Chosen Few Picnic, and it's like there's a lot of work that
There,
you have to, that you can build, I saw someone put Dwayne Powell. Dwayne Dwayne is a phenomenal individual, and Dwayne has built a following. Now, he
no
didn't
doubt.
necessarily promote a lot of the parties, but Dwayne has his music, his knowledge of music is so deep, and he's always had such a phenomenal ear. And I've known him going back to the '90s, before he was DJing.
Yeah.
He was just working at Dr. Wax, right, and that kind of stuff. Um, it is, a matter of just kind of rolling up your sleeve, and cultivating a sound, building a crowd, building a following, and that may only be 20, 30 people. But if the if you can continue consistently have those 20, 30 people, it's going to turn into 40, 60 people. um, and it's just a matter of, and they're going to be loyal, and they're going to be invested, because they remember when you had that night. And again, go back to what I said earlier. you know they were there at the beginning, that exclusivity, that best kept secret. I knew Kevin when he was, he just started, and we have this night, and now, it's grown. But I would encourage folks to, you know, strike out and try to build your name,
Uh,
build your crowd.
uh, on that note, I want to give a rousing round of applause. We don't always applaud our guest of the Vintage House Show, but I want to give some slow claps to my man Rick Lenoir for joining us on this episode of the Vintage House Show. It's a summer edition, if you will, of Vintage House. Speaking of which, I know John Young, who's tuned in, he's going to be at Bronzeville Summer Nights. I think their first night in that series is July 11th, the night before the Chosen Few, and then there's two more instances of Bronzeville Summer Nights. So come on over to the South Side and
Absolutely.
and check out Bronzeville Summer Nights. There is music coming from our guest tonight, Rick Lenoir. Please check him out on all the digital stores, and then he'll alert us when vinyl drops. And I want to thank everyone who was active, very active in our comments tonight. There's a lot of thanks and applause coming to you, Rick, and expressions of gratitude for all that you shared tonight. And of course, I'm at the top of that list. Your main man Mega has enjoyed this episode of the Vintage House Show, and again, I invite everyone to come back every Wednesday night. Check us out. I think Lori is going to have a member of the Chosen Few on her Wednesday, July 3rd episode. Yep, July 3rd episode of Vintage House. And of course, our spotlight hosts include DJ Momami, DJ Rocky Floyd, and then our super duper executive producer, Lauren Lowry, pops in every now and then as well to host a show. And she brings the questions from an archivist standpoint, as well as just trying to learn more about each of our guests. So thank you all. You can also check out our podcast on demand at any time. Go to vintagehouseshow.com and what some of the other platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google Play, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Check us out. Until next time, Rick Lenoir, you take care of yourself.
Same to you. Thank you, brother, for having me on. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. I'll take you up on that standing invite to jump in the lab.
Yeah.
And we'll make some magic happen again. Thanks to Mateo, our in-studio producer for tonight. We are WNUR 89.3 FM in Evanston, Chicago. And we are out for tonight's episode. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Thanks, guys. Have a nice night.